Hello.
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 The snow has stopped falling, but it's going to be a very long time indeed before we can forget the power and the fury of the blizzard of 96.
Through a curious 12 months ago, we had a presidential election that excited almost no one. We had contrasting fears and exhilaration over downsizing and Wall Street's record run. We had Olympic fever.
Also, a bomb in the park where athletes party. The Bulls skate towards another championship. Puko gives the ball to Jordan. Hanneman described as a hermit. Later identified him as Theodore Kaczynski. The fairy tale ended for Charles and Diana, who completed their divorce. As did Michael Jackson and Lisa Marie Presley.
And now you can find the polar bear right on the face of Canada's new $2 coin.
Oh, this is some scary movie.
Rap star Tupac Shakur died last night after a brief life in a rough business. He was 25.
Welcome to the High Fives podcast. I'm your host, Mike, and with me today is my new co-host, Justin. He can say hi now, or not.
No, I guess not. I'll just kind of keep it awkward.
Yeah.
Waiting for you to do the formal introduction.
Awkward is nice. That's how we roll around here. Justin, do you want to give a little intro about yourself, or do you want me to talk about you? I can talk about you if you want.
I would love you to talk about me. I've only known you for not that long, so I'm curious to hear what you might think.
Not that long, hey? Well, this is awkward because I don't really have anything planned to say about you. No, Justin's a close friend of mine and also a close friend of Nate's. We've been friends for a long time. He's been in bands. He ran a record label with us. He's also been a guest on the podcast before. But yeah, thanks, Justin, for joining me and filling in. I hope you don't end up like Poochie on The Simpsons, if you know that reference.
Who doesn't? I was actually really excited because I thought it was Poochie in this context. Right? He's young and hip and cool. That was
You're young and hip and cool.
Bring some life to this podcast.
What does Poochie say again? He says something awesome like catch you on the flip side or something stupid.
I think that's exactly what it is.
Oh, he says catch you on the flip side, Dudemeister. Even better.
You are a Dudemeister.
We're doing something a little bit different this year. Nate and me had always planned on changing it up this season and doing each episode solely focused on a year and picking albums from that year that we like. So we've decided to start with 1996. Why 96? Because 1994 would be too easy or complicated, one of the two. 96 is also probably when Justin and me became close friends.
It is, yeah. I think, we started, this is probably going to date us quite a bit, but we started high school in 95 is when we would have met. So, yeah, by 96, I think we were running hot, going steady. I don't know what the terminology would have been.
You were using me for my driving?
I don't think you had a license back then.
No, I didn't.
It might have been a genuine friendship, not based on getting picked up for school.
Not transactional.
Exactly. Now we are purely transactional.
Oh, yeah. We're going to run down a little bit of what happened in 96 if you don't have anything else to say. Did you want to say anything else, Justin?
No, I'm just, first of all, I'm really excited to be doing this podcast and keeping the bench warm for Nate while he's taking care of some things. A huge fan, genuinely, of the podcast. Perhaps the strangest thing about it is that when I listen to it, it feels like I'm actually hanging out with you guys, and then I think like, oh yeah, I just saw you guys like a couple days ago, and then I'm like, no, that was actually just on the podcast that I listened to. We weren't actually physically hanging out or conversing in any way.
I'm probably more fun on the podcast anyway than in real life. So
this is actually quite true. Your podcast persona is the life of the party. The mic party still, but it's a party.
That's why they call me a Dudemeister.
And I'm really excited about the format that we have in front of us and picking off 1 year at a time. I would like to think that this is sort of a little bit out of my wheelhouse, reaching back into those formative years of my life. But this is literally the same music that I listen to all the time now, and pretty much dress the same, and to varying degrees act the same as I did when I was 15 years old. So the level of comfort is quite high with this.
I like that you said you act the same way as you did when you were 15. That's pretty rad.
Like I would have an easier time doing a top 30 albums from 1996 than I would from 2023.
Yeah, I think that's probably true for most people our age. Like I think anybody gets like stuck in those formative years, and then like there's a few people that like continue discovering new music, but a lot of people just you end up at a certain point before you tap out and you're just like, that's it. I'm just gonna listen to the stuff I like. I'm done.
Yeah, and we're gonna find out really quickly here that I probably, like, in terms of life, peaked right around 1996. Maybe 1998 got a little bit better, but that's been a steady downhill from there. So,
well, your body hurts less for sure. It's much easier to get up in the 90s.
Absolutely. I want my 90s body back, as opposed to feeling like I'm in my 90s.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, because I definitely wish I had my teenage 90s body back. Probably less Crystal Pepsi though.
True. Okay. Enough about you wanting a teenage body.
Was Crystal Pepsi from the 90s, or is that like early? It must be early 90s.
Very much so, like early 90s.
Yeah, it wasn't an 80s thing.
No, I think it was 90s.
I legitimately only think of the SNL skit when I think of Crystal Pepsi.
It is so good. Like, that was peak SNL. Like, just like, I think that was in like the Chris Farley, Adam Sandler, in
their heyday.
I guess, yeah. Maybe it's just peak for us because that was like, again, it's the formative years of our lives. So
SNL is so of a time that I wonder if like you wouldn't get it. Like if you're 20 now, you're probably not laughing at Adam Sandler's like Schmidt beer thing, right? Like you're like, that's stupid.
For sure.
And probably a little bit homophobic.
Yeah, or like Crazy Pickle Arm, or was the Lunch Lady, like all his dumb songs and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're probably like dated.
Yeah, probably similar to like, people that would be a handful of years older than us would be like, oh, it's like the Steve Martin or Jim Belushi era of SNL would be like, to them, like the funniest that the show was ever was. But to me, I'm like, well, I don't get most of the references. The comedy seems a little bit archaic and all that kind of stuff. So
I wanted to kick this off by talking about some interesting things that happened in 1996. 1996 was a long time ago, even though in my head it doesn't feel that long ago. Like, do you get that too when you like think about it? You're like, that doesn't seem that long ago, and then you like stop and you're like, that's a real long time ago. Like,
there's definitely like this age compression where the last 20-ish years just feels like it's been, a handful of years, or maybe 10 years at the most, which makes this time of our lives feel like it's not that long ago.
And I kind of wonder, like, maybe because our group of friends has stayed friends for so long and the jokes stay the same, and like basically like our styles and what we like has stayed the same, so maybe it doesn't feel that long ago. Like, I mean, obviously we've grown up and we have lives and jobs and shit going on. At times I'm like, I could just jump back into my old high school life, minus the body hurting and being able to stay up past 11 o'clock. But yeah, so when I was going through this whole like what happened, I was like, oh, that was then? Like, that seems like not that long ago, but it really was. So some of the things that happened were, and maybe if you are interested in any of these, you can just jump in and say something, Justin. But basically, one of the big ones was that the Unabomber got arrested. For those of you that are too young to know who the Unabomber was, that was Ted Kaczynski, who was an American domestic terrorist. In America, Bill Clinton beat Bob Dole to start a second term as president, which is only really relevant to me because it led to one of the best Treehouse of Horror moments: abortions for some, miniature American flags for others.
It's genuinely one of my favorite Simpsons lines ever, that I would honestly say I use at least 1 to 3 times every single week of my life.
Yeah, it's perfect. And it works so well with elections these days. Timeless. In Canada, we welcome the toonie. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's a $2 coin with a polar bear in it. Do you remember how mad people were about this?
Yeah, I remember there being like people were upset, but also like I have very vague, like very limited memories of a $2 bill. Like I remember looking a lot like a 50, but it wasn't.
No, it was like brown, I think. The
Yeah,
$2 bill.
I think it looked pretty similar, didn't it? Do you also remember that there was like a rumor, or maybe some people actually did it, that if you froze a toonie and then hit the center with a hammer, you could pop the gold part out?
So when I was doing this research, those are the only videos I could find of people doing that back then and complaining about their toonies breaking. I'm like, you idiots, you're breaking money. You could rip a dollar bill too if you wanted.
That's actually really funny. I never thought about that. Like nobody would rip a dollar bill and be like, "Oh, I'm so upset about this."
Exactly.
Yeah.
What a weird time. What a weird thing to get mad at. Although maybe that's better when people are getting mad at stuff like that.
I guess so. Also, paper money seems so ridiculous when, us and the Aussies have that plastic stuff figured out.
Also, colored money. Get on the page, America. It's so hard to go to America.
They're ridiculous.
Here's a big one. Tupac was murdered.
Allegedly.
Well, they just arrested a guy.
Did they really?
Yeah.
Oh, was it Biggie?
They were hanging out together. Neither of them are dead. They're just both writing albums. They're really Taylor Swift.
Yeah, they're just waiting for hologram technology to improve just a little bit more, and they'll be back on the road.
The music world also lost Ella Fitzgerald, Tiny Tim, Eva Cassidy, and more relevant to this podcast for some, Bradley Nowell of Sublime.
I know who at least 2 out of those 4 people are.
The Summer Olympics were that year in Atlanta. Of note, and probably, again, only because of SNL, was the Carrie Strug thing, where she won gymnastics on a broken ankle. But all I can picture is the SNL, and I think it's Chris Kattan.
And Sherry O'Terry.
Yeah, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah.
And for Canadians, we won in track and field without the use of steroids, which was a big deal for us.
Again, speaking of Saturday Night Live and the Olympics, the skit, I'm pretty sure it was Saturday Night Live, where they had the steroid Olympics as a skit. It was amazing. So if I ever become a lunatic billionaire, I genuinely want to fund the steroid Olympics, where it all becomes about not like the fairness of competition, but a pure test of the human willingness to win at all costs. Like there would be no limits on how much you could dope or, push your body to extremes just to win what really is a fairly meaningless medal, and just see what people are willing to do and how much they can push themselves.
I'd like for you to get that money to see that. The Ramones played their last show ever, which I didn't know. Joan Benet Ramsey was murdered, which kind of put it down on the year, unless you're into true crime stuff, because it's still pumping out material to this very day. Movie-wise, some of the big movies were Independence Day, Scream, Fargo, Jerry Maguire, Twister, which I know you love, Justin, because of the Van Halen song.
We're going to circle back to this.
Yeah?
Yeah.
We got Space Jam, Beavis and Butthead Do America.
Beavis and Butthead Do America. Nate and I went and saw that on it must have been Christmas Day in 1996.
Look at you guys, spreading the cheer. Right. Nothing says Christmas like Beavis and Butthead.
It's a holiday classic.
Actually, that soundtrack's really good. It's got that awesome version of
Roller Coaster of Love. Oh, yeah.
Not that. The Rancid song on there. It's with them and the Stubborn All-Stars, but I can't remember which song it is now.
It's it's the I Want to Riot.
Oh yeah, that's what it is. That should have been easy. And on that note, music-wise, I feel like specifically after grunge, there was no sense of what pop music was, and everybody just kind of was trying to be the next big thing. Like, I think up until grunge, you knew what was popular, and I think that just kind of threw everything on its head. All of a sudden, hip-hop could be pop music, metal could be pop music, indie rock could be pop music, alternative, Britpop, everything could be pop music. So you get like just these like snippets of genres coming up that never would have hit the mainstream before. Maybe I'm way off, but that's the way I see it. I don't know about you, Justin.
Yeah, it really felt like popular music meant so many different things. Whereas earlier in the 90s, like grunge dominated so much, or it was like kind of like R&B style.
Yeah.
Like the early, I guess, I don't know, whatever.
Like Tony Braxton, stuff like that.
Yeah, or like the whatever wave of boy bands like Boyz II Men, or a couple of those types of bands or whatever in the earlier part of the 90s. and then like a little bit of dance pop, but it was sort of dominated by like a few genres, and you were either like on like the guitar rock star kind of thing, or you were into more pop dance music.
Yeah, I think that's what I was getting at. Is like before you were so pigeonholed into like what you liked, but all of a sudden, like as the '90s progressed, you got all sorts of things becoming popular, and I think the traditional format was just kind of tossed on its head, and it was no one knew what to do, so it was kind of a really cool time to be into music. Like I would say music has stayed that way. Like everything is a mishmash of everything, but it just seems different now. Like now you've got the internet and streaming playing a part in that, but before it was like because radio didn't know what to do, so sometimes you might get like a radio DJ that just found like a band and all of a sudden it became popular. Like where I don't think that happened before, and I don't think it happens again.
Yeah, it really was, again, probably a bit of a heyday for like the radio DJ. And that was like they could make or break bands, and radio stations could certainly like, still very much so like make or break a band.
Yeah, and same with I would say with MTV and stuff like that. Also, like just going through some of the releases that were off brand to this podcast, like Alanis Morissette's "Jagged Little Pill" was huge. Beck, Odelay, Tupac, "All Eyes on Me," Metallica, "Load," which is a big deal because this is where they cut their hair and tried something new.
Was this the first album after the Black Album?
Yeah, I think they didn't want to be associated with hair metal. Like they didn't want to be anything to do with hair metal, so they were trying to show that they were still edgy, right?
Yeah, and it really was like a getting getting away from metal, which had essentially been killed by grunge.
Yeah.
And they were trying to like make a comeback, and I can't tell you a single song off Load.
Until it sleeps. Probably everything you hear at a hockey game. I was really stoked on this album when it came out. Looking back, I hate it, but I did buy a Discman so I could listen to it in my car because you needed a tape adapter. I did see them on this tour, and it was an interesting show. Another band.
Sorry, just back to that Metallica show. Did you have to camp out at
Yes, I did.
At Ticketmaster? Like, what a crazy concept! Like, that's how you used to have to buy.
Yeah, so I have vivid memories of this. We went, and I think you probably were there. We went to see the People versus Larry Flint at Cell Center, and then I drove downtown, and like none of our friends were interested in Metallica, so I met with the most random of people from high school that like people I wouldn't be friends with anymore, or I couldn't even tell you their names, and I slept in a plus 15, and that was one of the first shows that had the middle circle part you could buy tickets to.
Yeah,
because it was figure eights
in the round, and then they had their like snake pit or whatever.
And the dude in front of me bought the last ones, and I was like so choked because I was buying tickets for my uncle and his buddies because I don't know why because I was stupid and they made me camp out for them, but I got to go with them. I still had really good tickets, but yeah, so it's such a weird concept of like having to go sleep downtown. And I think it was the first time I had ever done anything like that. Like it was crazy.
Well, it's kind of cool, right? Like, I mean, this is getting way off topic, but it kind of keeps fans going to the shows a little bit more. But if you really have to like sleep out overnight, like you're probably fairly committed to seeing that band.
It's insane for me to thinking about, and this is a big deal. Again, if you're young, you probably were like, "What the hell are these guys talking about?" But like when that Star Wars movie came out, people camped out for like days.
Yeah, what a bunch of losers!
You would never have to camp out for a movie. You just buy it on your phone now. You can show up. You have your seat booked for you, which is insane. What a different world we live in. But back to the music. Another one was Cardigans, First Band on the Moon, which is a band I love. Love Fool. I felt embarrassed that I liked Love Fool as much as I did in '96.
Like it's kind of one of those things where like how could you not? It was such a great song, and like total Swedish pop, kind of brilliance. Again, one of those sort of genre defining bands where they're not a dance band, they're not a grunge band, they're not heavy.
That's what I'm trying to say about that. The '90s is very weird with that kind of stuff. Really quickly, Weezer's Pinkerton came out. Arguably their best album or second best album. Rage Against the Machine, Evil Empire, pretty defining for our generation, I would say. Like
for sure, yeah, I love that album.
Ghostface Killer came out with his debut Iron Man, and for the pop people, Spice Girls, their debut album came out. So like, it's like what a weird group of music there. Like, and I would say all of that was stuff that was on the radio, and in some way at some point in '96 popular.
For sure.
but
And like,
all very different.
yeah, like all 10 of these could be airplayed as like the top 10 of 10.
Yeah, like weird. What a weird time. But yeah, before we get into our lists, why don't you tell me what you've been listening to? Nate used to do that, so I guess you have to do that now too.
All right, yeah. So before we go too far down the 1996 list, a couple things that have been getting some pretty decent rotation in my listening realm are the new Alkaline Trio record, Blood, Hair, and Eyeballs. I love this album. It is so good, like just a great return to form for the band, kind of taking it back to the earlier records of From Here to Infirmary and Good Morning. So really liking the vibes from that. The title track, which I think they put out as a single, the first single that came out on it, was super good, but the entire album holds up really well. And I'm just really happy to hear like a great Alkaline Trio album again. Not that the stuff that they had done, more recently was bad by any means, but this really felt like it was a great throwback to some of the albums of theirs that I like the most.
Yeah, it's crazy. Hey, like it's not that I don't like any of their albums, but as soon as I heard this, I'm like, oh man, this is what I've been missing. Like and it gets better every listen. And I think this was brought up in our WhatsApp chat. It's weird how like usually like the first bit of an album's the strongest part, but I feel like as the album goes on, it gets stronger, which is kind of cool.
For sure, yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. It's a shower and a grower. Like it is getting like better and better the more I listen to it. Also listening to an album came out late last year. It's a self-titled album from the band Iron Roses, which was suggested to me by you. So thanks for bringing that to my attention. I keep coming back to this album and listening to it, and there was a couple tracks I liked the first time, and then more and more and more, and now I'm listening to the whole thing front to back. It's just a great mix of like sort of straight ahead punk rock with really good pop sensibilities and hooks. There's little like bits of ska in there, or at least upstrokey guitar riffs, and even a couple screams. So it, for me, really sort of checks all the boxes, and really like the sound that Iron Roses has on their latest album. This one's going back a couple years, but I've started listening to Ben Quad, the album I'm Scared, That's All There Is. So it came out in 2022. Midwest emo sound to them, like very sort of jangly guitar bits and a little bit chaotic on the drums. And I can't say that it's a new sound or anything that they've really put out that's necessarily groundbreaking, but in the vein of Hot Mulligan and Sorority Noise and a lot of bands out of that sort of sound. This one's just a really, a pretty good listen. Some really smart hooks in there. And I actually regret not seeing these guys because they were touring with Spanish Love Songs and Hot Mulligan. And I saw the show, but we didn't see the opener, which is a bit of a miss. So going back, listening to the album now, and actually quite enjoying it.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. If you saw them with Spanish Love Songs, because I can't tell if it's a one person or a band.
I found out it's a band.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
I do like
name
how
of one person.
Oh.
The last one is going to be a bit of not just a bit of a reach back, but really this is where everything comes full circle, Mike. I've been listening to a lot of Van Halen lately.
That doesn't shock me.
Well, it shouldn't. But in particular, the song Humans Being from the Twister soundtrack.
Wow, that's very topical.
Totally. Like unintentional to the whole theme of the episode. They remastered it last year and put it out, and it sounds so good. I'm obviously a fairly big Van Halen fan, and that is my favorite Van Halen song, but I literally I can't get that song out of my head. Like once I listen to it, it's in my head for weeks. Like every part of that song just absolutely slays.
That's Sammy, right?
It is, yeah.
You lost me.
No.
Remember when you threw my Van Halen tape out of my car because you were like, Van Halen sucks? Because I do.
Because it wasn't Sammy.
Speaking of actually Sammy, you listened to the Sammy K cover of Jump, right?
I did, yeah.
That's fucking rad. That's
It's
a great
so
cover.
good. It's a really good cover. Yeah.
I guess I could have put that in my listening twos, but I didn't. That would have been a great segue. But I didn't. Good list, Justin. Thanks for putting that together. I look forward to listening to what old bands you're listening to these days in our next podcast.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a regular thing. My reach back.
That's okay. It's all about telling people what you were listening to and hopefully getting someone to check something out. I'll do mine now. The first band is, and maybe you can help me pronounce this band name because you told me about them. It's Kvelertak, like the Norwegian band. Do you know how to say it?
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, Kveler Talk.
Kvelertak. Okay. Again, a band you introduced me to. This one is called Endling, and it came out last year. But I didn't give it a listen until a few weeks ago, and I'm super hooked. If you haven't heard them before, they're from Norway and play a blend of 70s arena rock and metal that seems to bridge all aspects of the genre. Like there's shades of Sabbath and Thin Lizzy, but also like heavy, screamier, darker bands of the genre, which is an interesting way to write songs. Have you listened to this one at all, Justin?
I remember giving it a listen to when it came out, and then I think I sort of just put it on the shelf and didn't return back, but I'll have to come back and listen to it again.
Like it came out at a weird time, like right, I think in like the end of November, like when people were busy in December. Not a good time to release stuff. Apparently, when I was doing some research on it, the album is inspired by a Norwegian recluse named Helmut von Botlanas, who spent most of his life in isolation, occasionally emerging to fight against anything he came across that related to modern society in defense of nature. I can't 100% confirm that this is true because they sing in Norwegian, but I'm going to trust that that is true.
Yeah, I really like this band, especially they made a really interesting transition, like you touched on, from some pretty heavy, like straight ahead, like very not like death or gloom metal and not quite trash, but just really heavy sound, to a very like arena rock sound, like two-part guitar harmonies and stuff like that. And I love that they sing in Norwegian. I have no idea what any of the songs are about whatsoever. But
we do now.
Yeah, it's about the Ted Kaczynski guy, Norwegian Ted Kaczynski.
I don't think this guy bombed people that I know of, but maybe.
No, not yet. He could
not yet.
Could be putting something together. Yeah, love the band, and I think you and I saw them in Austin. Did we not?
We did. We did see them in Austin. I don't know if either of us remember seeing them in Austin, but we did see them in Austin.
Do you remember seeing them? Don't remember much of the show. I did see them once before that in a small club in Sweden, and I brought a bunch of me and another guy I went to school with that actually he had turned me on to them, but we brought like a bunch of classmates with us, and the band started, and they all looked at us like, like we had two heads, like, what are we here listening to? It was just like this assault of noise and screaming and like, just chucking guitars, and they were like, we're gonna go hang out at the bar in the back.
That's rad. Yeah, I'd like to see them live again, just in a better setting than a festival on
in the middle of an
Fender weekend.
Yeah.
Up next is a band from the UK called Hellwigs. Dare I say the best wrestling-themed punk band around. And they following up their EP, Load the Spaceships, with a new one called Raising Hell. If you're into that last EP, I don't see anything stopping you from enjoying this one. It opens with Legion of Doom's signature Oh What a Rush. Instantly had me interested. There's a song about Bam Bam Bigelow, a song about Sid Vicious. If this all sounds like your sort of jam, make sure to check them out.
I didn't know you to be one for the theme bands, so I'm a little surprised.
You didn't know I like theme bands?
I am absolutely shocked.
Oh, I love a good theme band.
I know.
Oh, okay. That's sarcasm.
That was dripping with sarcasm.
If only had a sarcasm meter.
It would be off the charts.
Off the charts. Up next is a band called Lathe of Heaven, and their album Bound by Naked Skies. They're a new wave post-punk, goth punk band from Brooklyn, perfect for late night drives and for fans of Joy Division. Justin, I think you would hate it, but if you're into that sort of thing, I would definitely check it out. Their album is also science fiction themed, but I'm not nerdy enough to know what that all means, but that was brought up in every review I read about the album. And the last one is a punk band from Atlanta called Seagulls. in their album The Rapture and the Resurgence. They play like
Sorry, is that seagulls like the bird or seagulls like Stevens?
like the bird.
Okay, that's unfortunate.
Maybe not.
I could get behind a Steven Seagal themed band.
He's such an asshole, but some of his 80s movies are pretty funny. In like the bad action movie way.
I don't know if Nate sent it to you, but he sent it to me as a clip of him doing an interview not terribly long ago, because he looks like he does now. And he was speaking this bizarro, like sort of pseudo-Russian accent. And halfway, like at some point in the interview, he says like, "How do you say in English?" And then he says whatever he was trying to say. And then
What a loser.
The clip cuts to some other guy. He's like, "How do you say in English? You are American. Like how? This is the language you speak." It was so funny.
He went from Asian culture appropriation to Russian culture appropriation, so shouldn't have been that big of a stretch.
And I think there was a lot of like First Nations and Native American. Just
he's a weird dude. Not a good guy. Anyway, the band Seagulls have nothing to do with Steven Seagal. Thankfully, they play kind of gruff core punk, but there's also like elements of 90s skate punk in there. At times, they feel a little bit like Lawrence Arms. If Lawrence Arms shouted more, and also a little bit like Banner Pilot. I could see how this would translate into a really great live show. I'd suggest checking it out if you're looking for that sort of sound. And I think that wraps up the listening to portion of this podcast. I don't have Nate here playing me off with music like the Grammys or anything like that. So we're just going to wing it.
That's great.
We get to make the rules now.
Good
Nate
list.
is kind of a stickler for rules.
Yeah, he's like that.
Good guy, but stickler for the rules.
We're gonna make this up as we go.
Yeah, that's how it works. Yeah, so before we get into our lists, just a couple questions or thoughts I had about our lists. When I'm making this up, I was trying to think of how I was going to do it, because you can approach it from a few angles. You can be like, what did I listen to in 1996? What's universally accepted as the best albums of 96? What still gets me interested about a band from 1996 or an album? So, and then the role of nostalgia, like versus what holds up. So I was kind of curious how you approached it before seeing your list.
Yeah, there's definitely so when we pick the year and you sort of start the research, it's super exciting because there's so many good albums, and a lot of them you're like, oh, I love this album, I love this one, I love this one, and then I started sort of going back through. I'm like, okay, well, I got to start cutting this down a little bit and really thinking of that. Those are actually like great questions. Like, what makes an album sort of worth coming back to? Here we are, like almost 30 years later. To me, I think there's definitely like, it needs to be an album that stands up even today, that you can go back and listen to and say like, oh, this came out 27, 28 years ago and it still holds holds weight and has good carry to it. There's certainly going to be a nostalgia part of this. I think it would be hard to not carry your own bias with some of these, and they're going to tie back to memories, the people you're with when you first heard that album, seeing that band at a show. I think it'd be hard to get away from the nostalgia side of things. There's a couple albums, and as we sort of go through the list, we can touch on them in a little bit more detail, that I have on here that aren't necessarily my favorite albums, but I think they were really important for either the time that they came out or represented, a certain part of the genre or whatever. Like, they just have a larger collective meaning to punk rock that make them an important album to have come out in 1996.
That's a really good point. Like, I didn't pick any of those albums, but there's at least 3 or 4 that I debated putting on the list based solely on that. I didn't put them because I felt like it'd be lying for me, just because I don't go and listen to them that much. But for example, one of the albums, I don't think it's on. I hope it's not on your list, because I'm not, and I'm not trying to bash it at all, because I do like it. And like the Descendants album that came out, I don't listen to it. I wasn't a huge Descendants fan at the time, but I understand how important that album is in pop punk and in punk rock. Like, everyone loves that album, and like, it's just it's like for me, I couldn't put it on there because I thought it would be like lying and saying like, oh yeah, I love this album. But like universally, I could see how it would be on a lot of people's top 5 albums from that year.
Yeah, definitely. Like that's a great example of an album that has probably a lot of significance to the genre.
Yeah, and like something that maybe some of the younger listeners might not know, I'm sure they do. I mean, like this, they're not idiots. Is like finding music back then was a little bit different, right? Like we didn't have access to everything, so some of your list when you're looking back at '96 might have something more to do with geographically what you had access to. Because like Justin and me living in Canada didn't have access to the same bands and that some people like living in Southern California did, right? Even though these bands were big, finding them at a music store was hard. So it's not like you could go listen to it online or download it. So you're basing it off if someone told you about a band or if you looked it up in the credits of a band, like a thank you thing, or you saw them on a tour, or you saw a band wearing a shirt, then you might find a way to figure out, like, find an album or something like that. Like, or one of the ways we did was like the Fat Records compilations, I would say, or Punkaramas. Like that played a big role in what we like. So that doesn't necessarily quantify it as quote unquote best by a critic standard, but to me, that it would play such an important role in what I liked. Or even local bands like the Everyman's 12-inch came out at that time. It's called Sit On It, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
like that came out in '96. Like, and we all listened to that like as much as we did some of the Fat Records albums. Is it good? Yeah, it's good to us. I'm not sure if it holds up for like anybody who didn't love that band. Or same with the Inquisition 7-inch with like Drunk and Stupid on it, or like one of the bands, the local bands was Beyond Possession, had that compilation that came out too with all their greatest hits, and I listened to that like all the time. But I'm not sure that resonates outside of Calgary. I mean, or
I think that's really sort of that
circles, like
that sort of nostalgia piece of like, we would like see those bands all the time.
Or like a band like I'm gonna guess, and I'm sure any of the Aussie guys might have a different opinion, but like a band like Body Jar, I think is like super influential in Australia. But did Body Jar mean anything to the average Canadian kid? Probably not, because we didn't have access to Body Jar albums, right? Like they weren't playing here. You might have heard them on a comp. Like I heard the name, but I didn't know much about them. There's all that kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what people come up with if they send in their list, like, because I feel like it opens up a lot of things if you start thinking in those terms.
Yeah, and unlike Nate, I'm actually super excited to see the lists come through and what people thought about the year. So,
oh, Nate doesn't care. He just wanted to hear his own list.
Yeah,
and then make fun of me.
Well, you're still going to get made fun of. So
yeah, we should probably get to our list instead of talking and blabbering on about stuff. I'm sure people would like to hear what albums we picked and why. And since Nate used to start, how about you start, Justin? What was your first album that you picked?
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate getting first row here.
We're cordial, if anything, here.
I'm sorry?
We're cordial, if anything, here.
That's right. If nothing else, gentlemen. My first pick on the list is a band from Calgary. So really pumping not just the CanCon, but the CalCon. The first band or first album I picked is Chicks Dig It with an exclamation mark point at the end by the band Chicks Dig It, of course. Chicks Dig It were one of the first bands I ever listened to in the punk rock world. So this was like back in like probably like 1993, 1994, somewhere in there. I saw them play in a field in Forest Lawn. By like it was like something that was put on, I think, by the city of Calgary, like a youth like showcase sort of thing. But it was literally a field in Forest Lawn that Chicks Dig It played with a couple other bands, but I don't remember who.
That's a crazy story.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
It was wild. Like I would have been like 13, and I think my mom dropped me off for like a few hours so I could see them play. I remember seeing them on, there's a very famous, maybe famous is a strong word, very famous to 17 people in Calgary at the time, but a compilation put out called Bloodbath at the Chinese Disco. that came out, I think, in 1994. And Chicks Dig It was part of this. They had 2 songs on it, along with a host of other, like, it really was like a who's who of the Calgary indie rock, punk rock, all ages scene. But what I liked about Chicks Dig It, besides them being like just really fun and easy to listen to, was it sort of made me realize that not every band is from, Seattle or Chicago or New York or LA. That you can have local bands, and these bands can actually be, like people from around the city, and that sort of turned me on to the all ages scene here, and the idea of like gigs and going to see local bands, and like whether it was at a coffee shop or one of the halls or wherever, or some field and forest lawn. There were local bands playing shows, and they were playing the sort of music that you wanted to listen to, which I thought was really cool. So they really helped me transition from kind of radio rock and grunge and alternative to not just seeing local bands, but also like listening to punk rock a little bit more, which sort of put me down the musical path that I'm very much on today. So Chicks Dig It, again with an exclamation point at the end, was released on May 21st, 1996 on Sub Pop Records, which
is crazy.
Blew my mind to think about it. And I remember like seeing this at the time, that like what a label to be a part of. Like this was Nirvana's label, not their label, but the label that they were on.
Yeah.
Like they had Mudhoney, they had Sunny Day Real Estate. Like it's crazy to think that like a local band could make it to what I thought was like such a huge label. I later found out that Nirvana was, I think Bleach was the only album that came out on Sub Pop, but one of the conditions of releasing Nirvana from Sub Pop to sign to wherever they signed, like Geffen or A&M or whatever, was that they had to put the Sub Pop logo on all of their future releases.
Oh, that's rad.
Which is incredible. Like it made probably like that for sure made such a huge difference in Sub Pop success.
Yeah, I mean that's who you universally associate with Sub Pop right off the top. It's like you think Nirvana. That's I knew I knew that only that first album was on there, but I just assumed I don't think I ever even thought about Sub Pop being on the other stuff. I just assumed maybe they were like still had a contract with them.
So I know we talked about how these lists get picked, but to me, like this one hits pretty hard on the nostalgia scale. Back in the day, like we knew every song on this album, so it was a big unifier amongst all our friends, regardless of what your musical tastes were. We all liked this album. Like, how could you not like?
I still love this. I would listen to this album once a week, probably. Still, like if it comes, like I love this album.
Yeah, it's great. Like I would say front to back, but the album is it's 15 songs and it's all of 27 minutes.
Front to back, perfect.
Yeah, like you could listen to the entire thing back in the day, like waiting for the bus, or but we saw the band play all the time at the Black Lounge. It felt like that there was such a big part of us, as kind of like teenagers and friends.
So one thing I find funny about Chicks Dig It is like, I mean, as a 15 or 16-year-old, when you're listening to songs like I Want to Hump You, you kind of like laugh at it. And that is part of the appeal as a 15 or 16-year-old stupid kid. And normally when I go back and I'm like, I'm just like embarrassed that I like stuff like that. But for some reason, this album's still like everything. I'm not embarrassed. I would sing along to I Want to Hump You. Like,
yeah.
Like,
or like Henry Rollins is no fun, or like just.
I wouldn't think 2 seconds about any of that. Like it doesn't have that same, like it doesn't feel goofy.
So the song I picked off Chicks Dig It, the album with an exclamation point, is I Drove the Coca-Cola, which to me is just, it's the epitome of Chicks Dig It. So for our non-Western Canadian listeners, the Coca-Cola is a highway that essentially runs right through interior BC, and it's like whatever. It's just it's a
Calgary to Vancouver route.
It's the Calgary to Vancouver route. It's the way that you would most easily get out to Vancouver from here. The song is 1 minute and 45 seconds in length. There's literally about 7 words in total in the entire thing, and it's about like driving 12 hours to go see a girl on this death trap of a highway. You could hear the song once, know all of the words, and sing along to it, which I think was such a huge part of the appeal to Chicks Dig It, is like there wasn't a lot to get there, but it was so fun to go along
that's-
with it.
I never really thought about that till you just said that. That maybe is some of the appeal of Chicks Dig It, especially when you're young. You're like, KJ's voice is clear enough so you can understand what he's saying. The songs aren't overly complicated. They're catchy and you could sing along to everything. So like the investment isn't crazy. So maybe that was the big payoff of Chicks Dig It.
Yeah,
Also,
and
it's a great name.
It really is. Well, they started with the name.
Yeah.
They had a name before they had a band. They had T-shirts before they had a band. That was the whole reason they started. Which is also a great story. Just start making T-shirts and become a band later.
Yeah, we're too old for that. But some kid do that.
Yeah.
Great
Good
song.
marketing. Name is everything.
Good song,
I love
great album.
Sorry?
It's a great song, great album, Justin.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to say about it? Sorry.
I do. In typical KJ fashion, in order to draw the song out, there's not only a keychain, but a killer classic guitar solo. He can play the guitar like a motherfucking riot. And they even draw out the ending to make it 90 seconds in length. Like, what a great song. Like,
so my first album that I picked is one that I hummed and hawed about. It's definitely a nostalgia pick for me, and I was gonna go with a nostalgia one right off the bat, and I debated between this and Diesel Boy, and only because I think the Diesel Boy album is just really not good. But again, like you had mentioned, the Chicks Dig It thing, like we sang along to that Diesel Boy album quite a bit for some reason.
Was that Cock Rock that came out?
Yeah, like Titty Twister, like
Yeah.
My pants are falling down. Like I probably still say that. My pants are falling down. The room is spinning round and round. But then I decided, I was like, well, like Diesel Boy is not really like this big hit thing, and it doesn't really stand the test of time. But the album I did go with was NoFX Heavy Petting Zoo. It's the 6th studio album from NoFX. It's funny because when I was looking up reviews, it's kind of like hit or miss. People either like it or really don't like it. And one of the things I can pinpoint on it is that it is kind of where NoFX really started changing their sound. Like they started implementing a lot more like different, like they had the xylophones on the one song. The recording quality is a little bit different than it's like there's a lot less like compression on the album, so it doesn't sound as like funk as like White Trash or the albums before that.
It didn't sound so like kind of off the floor, fuzzy. Like there's definitely a crispness and a refinement to it. Not like a high, highly polished studio pop album, but definitely like a more cleaned up version of it. And definitely like I know exactly what you mean in terms of, they're trying different elements to the music. There's more change ups, different instruments being used, even things like like use of effects pedals, and like I can't remember what song it is, but there's one that's got like the wah pedal through the whole thing.
Yeah, like I think, and I could see how if you were like a purist at the time, you're like, oh, they're just trying to write a major label album or something.
Yeah, because you're wanting to hear like "Sticking in My Eye" or "Linoleum" again.
Yeah, exactly. But the reason that I like this album so much is because it's the first one I owned, so it always kind of had a spot in my heart. Like I said previously, like I was kind of newer to punk, and a lot of the punk stuff I picked up was from you guys in school, like kind of leading me away from metal and hip hop and stuff like that, and discovering these new bands. And at that time, I think I just picked it up. If anybody doesn't know, like the album art was a big deal at the time too. I don't know if album art's still such an issue. Do you think album art, like if someone released something with some crazy album art, it would even like be a red flag anymore, or people just not care?
Yeah, I don't. Well, I guess with vinyl now, maybe.
If you don't know, it's like a guy fingering a sheep, I think, right?
Yeah, speaking of vinyl, the vinyl is quite different than that.
Yeah, the vinyl is him going down on the sheep, right?
Yeah, I think there's 69.
I know I had to buy this behind the counter at HEB, which I thought was funny. They sold it to me, but it was behind the counter.
Well, you can just be showing that on the shelves.
Yeah, I guess so, but they could have put a sticker on it. I don't know. There's a lot of juvenile NoFX humor on this album, but in the way that they do it, where it's like mocking stuff, or it's a little bit sarcastic. 16-year-old me ate that shit up. I still find some of that stuff funny, but maybe I'd go about it a different way now that I'm older and we know a little bit more about stuff. But they got their point across especially for a teenage boy, like some of the stuff that they were bringing awareness to in a silly manner, but you still thought about it. So one of those songs that did that for me was "Drop the World," which is the song I ended up picking.
That's a great song.
Yeah, I'm 90% sure it's the closer on the album, like maybe 99%. Yeah. So just kind of saying that, like, I think the song is basically about how everyone is going through stuff and maybe you don't know what they're going through and all that kind of thing. So anyway, that was why I picked Heavy Petting Zoo by NoFX. Justin?
I Drove the Coca-Cola by Chicks Dig It off Chicks Dig It.
Drop the World by NoFX off Heavy Petting Zoo.
Saturday, gotta run, gotta go, gotta be with you. And I'm gonna see it through, 'cause I wanna see you. Oh yeah. How I go, I don't know, wanna go, wanna be with you. And I'm gonna see it through, 'cause I wanna see you. I drove the Coca-Cola. Just to be with you. Oh yeah. I drove the Coca-Cola. Just to be with you. Let's ride. Drove the Coca-Cola. Just to be with you. Oh yeah. I drove the Coca-Cola. Just to be with you. Oh yeah. Just to be with you. Oh yeah. Just to be with you. Oh yeah. Just to be. Everybody, just to be here with you. Thanks. He won the race, the judges concluded. He was a better man. He'd come from victory. Hesitate. A one-time show of place itself would not allow. He had to be the best. He had denied his urges 'cause they would have drained his strength. That battle had been won with side effects of few. He may have dropped the word. He would not let us down. Way I hope she's in a better place.
Justin, you know the deal. You can tell us your second pick now.
All right, jumping right back into it.
Look, you knew. You knew what to do. This is awesome. We don't need Nate.
Yeah, we're seasoned professionals at this point. This album, I really hummed and hawed about putting this one on the list because I did not listen to this in 1996. Not even close. I don't think I had listened to this album until quite possibly just a few years ago. But when I did, it really sort of threw me for a loop. I couldn't believe that this album had come out in the 90s. I would have pegged it, at the absolute earliest, somewhere around the early days of the rise of emo, where it really started hitting mainstream, like sort of in that full collapse, tell all your friends era of emo or emo punk or emo core or whatever you want to call it. And I was amazed that this album came out about 5 or 6 years before those ones did. The band is from New York City. Texas is the reason. The album is Do You Know Who You Are? And the song that I picked is called Back and to the Left. So,
oh man, that song's so good.
It's such a great song, and the album is really good too. It's the only album that they put out. They broke up apparently right. They were on tour for this album, and they were about to sign with Capitol Records. And the story in my semi-cursory research is they were really humming and hawing about whether they wanted to sign to a major label, if they really wanted to make a go off this. They were probably a little apprehensive about like what was going to happen next. And they were playing a show, I think actually in Germany. And they said, if the show goes well, we're done. We're just going to go out on the high note. We sort of know who we are and what we have. And that's it. That's what happened. They played the show. They said it went super well. And that was the last of this band. I think they'd done a couple reunions here and there, but really that was kind of the end of the band. A couple other things I came across is that the name Texas the Reason comes from a Misfits song, so I thought you would appreciate that. And
it's legit the reason I checked that band out.
Is it really?
Yeah.
There's good emo vibes to it. There's a lot of rock to it. And the song Back and to the Left is just like, kind of quintessential emo listening for anyone that loves that quick, raucous melodic song with huge half tempo throwdowns and just a ton of drive to it. So, yeah.
I've always wondered.
Late discovery for me, but I'm a big fan.
That's okay. I've always kind of wondered, like, had they stuck together, what would have happened with them? Because I think they were one of those bands you'd hear about as being so influential. And I mean, some of the guys that we hung out with would talk about them and stuff. And I came a little bit later to them as well, but the only reason I was really interested in them was because of the title of their name. And because people had said, like, oh yeah, like, they're the reason that, like, all these bands got big and all this stuff. Like, there's, like, this lore about... yeah, just they're super good. I didn't know they were from New York though until you just said that. So that's interesting. I always assumed, for some reason, I just assumed they were from Texas.
I would have thought so too. I don't know another reason to call your band Texas is the reason, but I guess the Misfits is pretty big.
I'm gonna move my list around a little bit to fit with this song because this is also a band and album I did not listen to in 1996. I didn't listen to Jimmy Eat World or Static Prevails, but it's an album I discovered later on and one I consistently go back to listening to, which is kind of the idea of this list, I guess. Static Prevails is the first major label release by Jimmy Eat World. There's some interesting stories behind this. If you're really interested, I suggest reading their chapter in Sellout.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, the label did not like this album at all. But they got picked up kind of in that like wave of we're trying to sign the next Green Day, the next everything, right? So they got picked up. And one of the things I remember from the book is them saying that like the studios listening to the album and saying these song structures don't make sense. They're all over the place. And then Jim saying like, no, that's what's great about it. We're just like write parts and then put it together. And if you think about Jimmy Eat World, that's totally how a Jimmy Eat World song is. It's just like really good parts put together in a song.
Yeah, I could totally hear that in a lot of their stuff. That's probably the sort of magic of Jimmy Eat World is that they can take like seemingly disconnected pieces and stitch them together in a way that has a really unique end result.
Yeah. So if you're into that sort of thing, I definitely recommend reading Sellout. I don't want to misquote anything or anything like that, but the gist of it is this album basically got shelved by the major, but it was out there. And they did get some pop credentials out of it because the song 17 ended up on a Drew Barrymore movie soundtrack called Never Been Kissed. And I guess they got them some play in the States and got a little bit of push for the album then after that. But back to me, because our podcast is not about Drew Barrymore's movie. I fell in love with this album after discovering Clarity and then going back and downloading. And this is maybe one of the first songs I ever downloaded off Napster, episode 4. And I fell in love with it and the album. And I liked how like raw it seemed for like an emo album. It sounded like the stuff we were listening to at all ages shows and stuff, because it's like the recording on it's great, is good, but not great. So it's just like, it's very of its time. And you can see where they're trying to get their sound. I mean, like at that time, they were both singing in the band, which I don't think happens very often anymore. I think basically Complete American Jim sings everything, right? Do you know?
I don't.
No, I think it's a great album. If you like Jimmy Eat World, you should listen to it. And the song I ended up going with, I figured, was Thinking That's All. Have you ever listened to this Jimmy Eat World album? You're not a huge Jimmy Eat World fan, eh?
I'm not the biggest fan. I mean, there's definitely some of their songs that I really like, and they've written some really incredible stuff, but they're not a band that I actively go back and listen to.
That's fair. I can see why certain people like them and certain people don't. I hope whoever's listening likes it, because I'm not here to impress Justin.
Well, you should be. All right. Texas is the Reason off the album Do You Know Who You Are? And the song is Back Into the Left.
Jimmy Eat World with Thinking That's All off Static Prevails.
welcome back. That's right. I'm now fully taking over lead microphone duties. It's been a silent revolution.
I like it. I abdicate.
All right. On to pick number 3 off our list. I'm super excited about this one. This band is from Santa Cruz, California, and the album that I'm picking from is their second. It came out on June 4th, 1996 on, of course, Fat Records. The album is a comprehensive guide to modern rebellion. The band is Good Riddance. This is like, I remember the first time listening to this album and just being like, absolutely blown away right from the first track. So, going back an album, Forgotten Country really set Good Riddance off for myself, for a lot of us. It kind of had this drive and this angst and this anger, but also like an approachability to it. And it wasn't skate punk. It was something more. It was something heavier, not just in the music itself, but I think also the lyrics and the content. And they were really sort of pushing into that political punk sphere, and they had messages, they had things to say. And it wasn't just about like girls or good times or, being a jackass, which I really liked. I really kind of gravitated to some of their messaging. I thought it was also crazy that they put this album out 16 months after Forgotten Country came out. And this, I've always wondered about like how Good Riddance could do this, because they put out 4 albums in 4 years, and they toured all that time. Like, we probably saw Good Riddance easily half a dozen times in a few years. It seems like they were always on the road, always touring, always playing shows, and somehow putting out a number of albums at the same time too. So that was pretty crazy. But one of the things I think about with their shows is they drew from a different audience. They brought out bigger crowds than a lot of the other, obviously bigger than the local bands, but bigger than a lot of the touring bands that came through. And not just a bigger crowd, but a little bit of a different crowd. And they brought out sort of the more skateboard, snowboard scene for sure. And that's probably some of the California kind of influence. And thinking back to the genres and what was happening, I think the idea of skateboard videos and snowboard videos and being on the soundtrack to like some of those, I guess it would have been like VHS, like
they were definitely VHS
sport, kind of tapes that came out. If you were a band and you could land yourself on the soundtrack to snowboard video by like Trans World or whatever, like it was such a big way to change the way of your band.
I always thought it was funny for like Good Riddance because they are so associated with that in my head. And maybe that's partly because of where we live and snowboarding being such a big cultural thing here, especially at that time. But like lyrically, they don't really suit some of that genre. So I always thought it was funny.
Yeah, it's funny. Like even as from an appearance standpoint, like Russ is like he was a hockey guy. Was it Luke, the bass player, was like always in a basketball jersey. Like they sort of had a jockey look to them, but then they also had songs literally about like not beating up people in the mosh pit because you're a dumb jock.
Yeah, like I learned a lot from Good Riddance. Like I just think it's funny because people like that don't know much about them shit on them sometimes because I think they're so associated with that and skate punk and stuff. They're not like that at all, but they do kind of come from that. For sure.
Yeah, I think they probably leaned into it because they, recognize that, there's
working.
Yeah, there's a reason that we're getting, 2 or 3 or 5 or 8,000 people out to every show they play.
It's funny. I associate this album with you quite a bit. I'm not sure why, but this one was always associated with you. Did you have a Good Riddance shirt when we were in high school?
I most certainly did. At least a few. I know I mentioned it, but I love the way the album starts. It's the sound clip, which is sort of became the formula or the trademark of Good Riddance because the next, I think 4 albums came out that they came out with all had like an opening sound clip. And then they actually did it again in the 2019 release of Thoughts and Prayers, which is a great album, right? To think that came out 20 plus years after they released their first couple albums. And I thought Thoughts and Prayers was such a great sort of tie back to the sound that they had when we really started loving this band.
And also a good point about the sound clips. They're the kings of the sound clip and they're good at it. Like they're always good. They're not like
they pick like really great clips. They could probably put out a best of album using just sound clips, like no music whatsoever, just the sound clips. One thing I always thought interesting about Good Riddance is, and maybe it was the sort of intensity in which they pumped out albums and toured, is they sort of, I don't know if they hit like a, maybe it was writer's block, maybe it was just like trying to write different stuff, but I felt like as they departed from the sound that they, I think, really were known for, that's really where I felt Rise Against stepped in and really kind of took that same sound, that really melodic hardcore punk, like driving guitars and bass, and like super fast drums, and I think Rise Against sort of like took that torch and really ran with it. Like I find that there's just such an overlap in the sound.
I definitely see that, and the aesthetic and the lyrics and whatnot. Like there's definitely a bridge there between them, and I'm gonna guess they probably ran in the same circles. Like the dude from Rise Against was in 88 Fingers Louie, right? And I feel like them and Good Riddance were playing shows and stuff together.
Yeah, I feel like the guy from 88 Fingers Louie is just a statement. Is like that's how bands are known. Like, oh, isn't that what the guy from 88 Fingers Louie? Like, I don't know if anyone has actually listened to 88 Fingers Louie, but they just seem to be the farm team for like so many other bands.
Chicago bands.
Yeah, they're just like, yeah, they sort of push out so many other bands. There are actually some, like I think 88 Fingers has some great songs as well, but I just feel like they're like a farm team for other like more well-known touring bands.
That's a good topic actually for an episode if we ever get out into a different topic. Farm team bands.
Yeah,
I like
the
that
guy
term.
from.
Sorry, which song did you pick? Did we do that?
I picked the song "Last Believer." I had to sort of quite honestly scroll through a few past lists because obviously Good Riddance is a band that you, myself, and Nate like quite a bit, and they've popped up a few times. So I wanted to make sure we picked a song that we haven't had on the podcast before. So the song I chose was "Last Believer."
Good work on the research. I wouldn't have done that, but I'm lazy.
It shows.
Yeah, I know. Okay, well, I'm going to stick with a fat band as well. And this one's kind of a weird one because it's a band that I think's overlooked on Fat Records a lot, but they put out some serious bangers, and this is one of them. And the band is Snuff, and I have no fucking clue how to say the title of this album. Musa Bebonk? Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I know the one you're talking about. Is that like it's the blue album with the fish on it? Is that the one?
Yeah, like the toys or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is one of the bands that got my attention solely because of Survival of the Fattest, which is the Fat Records compilation. I believe the song Nick Northern was on it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Correct. So I ended up picking up this album based solely on that. It's energetic, catchy. Feel the songs you want to shout along to if you can understand what they're saying. Most of the times you cannot, but yeah, I don't know. I just always really liked them. They come from the Guns and Wankers farm team.
That's right, featuring the guy from Guns and Wankers, who have, I think, one of the better songs to ever come out of Fat Records.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's a really good album, and I think it's definitely one of the albums that maybe gets overlooked, especially when people talk about Fat Records and this era. Footnote, I'm shocked at how many albums that Snuff has actually released. I looked it up the other day. I'm like, they have so many albums, and they're still going, which is crazy. So
yeah, didn't they just put out an album last year?
They did. I didn't know that until last week.
Like it's one of those, like they sort of like pop up like in my recommends or my feeds or whatever, and I'm like, is this the same band? Like this, is this still like?
Well, actually, I should have checked into that, but I assume it is.
It is. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. Also, a band I've never seen live. Have you seen them live?
That's a great question. I can't recall seeing them live. And I'm even trying to think of our friends and do I remember anyone with a Snuff T-shirt, because that was really the only way.
Yeah.
Well, it's no different now. Like mail order was really cost prohibitive when you're making $4 an hour.
That's a really good point. maybe Nate would have seen them. He'd be the one we would have to ask if they ever came here, or he probably saw them somewhere. But I've never seen them. I think I would, if they were around, I would go see them live just to see what it was like. They seem pretty intense, and there's a lot. It seems like there's a lot going on in these albums.
Yeah, I think especially back then because they were fast, like much like kind of where Guns and Wankers left off. Like they were like they had a lot of really fast songs, and it was crazy that their drummer is the lead singer of the band. And
I didn't even know that.
Like he would play. Like I was always kind of blown away. Like he could play that fast and sing at the same time. It was quite remarkable.
And like in terms of Fat Records, they kind of, they sound like a Fat Records band, but they also don't. Like their tempos are different. They're like, they don't have that same skate punk sound, but they're still of that ilk, if that makes sense. Like there's something different about them that made them appealing too.
For sure. Yeah. That's a great pick.
And the song I picked is called Sunny Places. So
excellent. Yeah. Good picks for round 3. Good Riddance off the album A Comprehensive Guide to Modern Rebellion. The song is Last Believer.
Snuff with the song Sunny Places off the album I cannot pronounce.
Has left us, leaving nothing but effect. The laughter has subsided, leaving hatred in its wake. In a nation trusting no one, sworn to bend but never break. America is burning, look around, it's in the air. But I'll be the last believer, as long as I still care. And I still care, I still care. What's going on? What's happening now? Show me a purpose, please show me how. Desperate times, 1,000 symptoms, one disease, government's petition, genocidal policies. Don't look back, don't wait till history repeats. No more lies, no more bodies in the streets. Laughter has subsided, leaving hatred in its wake. In a nation trusted no one, sworn to bend but never break. America is burning, look around, it's in the air. But I'll be the last believer, as long as I still care, and I still care. Go! Leaving hatred in its
All right, on to number 4. I'm just going to jump right in here. This band, this again, it was sort of, we touched on it a little bit in terms of like, how do you pick, or narrow down the choices for, from releases for a full year. This pick made the list, not necessarily because they're my favorite band or even that I like a lot of the songs on this album, and it's probably the one I would listen to the most, but it wasn't necessarily my favorite album, from the time. But I think it's a really important album for punk rock and really helped like kind of create a sound. The band is from Victorville, California, which I did a quick Google search on. I'm sorry, I did a quick Bing search on.
Thank you, Justin. You don't want to piss off the sponsors.
Using Bing Maps, the most reliable map software out there. I mean, the only map software out there. And I think it's in the Valley, what Californians would refer to as the Valley. The band is Face to Face. The album is Face to Face. And this is the third full-length album from the band. So it came out after Don't Turn Away and Big Choice. It's the first band that has Scott Shiflett in it, who I always thought was like an original member of Face to Face.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he joined sort of a couple albums in. This is also, believe it or not, the first Face to Face album that does not have Disconnected on it. So if anyone's keeping track on
this is a major label one, right?
It's the second. Big Choice was a major label one as well.
Big Choice is. I always thought Big Choice is an Epitaph.
No, Don't Turn Away was on. It's either on Fat or Epitaph.
Maybe Fat.
Yeah,
I didn't know. Big Choice is on a major. Crazy, I never knew that.
This was on a major, and that was the one. Sorry, maybe it got re-released on a major. Disconnected, for the record, is, in my opinion, the best punk rock song ever written, which is a huge statement, and I stand by it. It's the best. The best, if I was to think of what it means
to be. Skate punk one, maybe.
I think beyond that, like if I was to think of like what does punk rock mean to me, this is Disconnected by Face to Face.
That's a huge statement.
It's big. Here we go. First episode, and I'm swinging
balls to the wall on the first episode. Eh? Yeah, that's as crazy as you liking Sammy Hagar.
We need more controversy on this podcast, I think.
Okay.
There's my controversial statement. Wait till you hear my strung out opinions. This album I found was definitely more polished than Don't Turn Away or even Big Choice, despite that one also being on a major label. But when I listened to the band, like sort of, on this album, cover to cover, or even some of their previous stuff, there's sort of really nothing special about like the Face to Face's sound. Like there isn't, to me, anything that makes them individually like unique, or they have like a standout musicianship, or like they've got really great hooks to their songs. But I think one thing that Face to Face has is a signature sound that in the world of skate punk was very approachable. It feels like they're playing really fast songs, but their tempos are actually not that fast, and they're really easy to sing along to. The vocals carry so much of the melody to each of their tracks, like it's an instrument onto itself, which is actually something I think No Use for a Name used a lot as well.
I would say that I agree with you on this, that Face to Face is probably the most accessible band in that genre for that time. Like it's kind of weird that they didn't get much bigger. I mean, this is going to sound weird, especially with the connection, but they have kind of like a Foo Fighters thing going for them. That if you heard a song of theirs, you wouldn't be like shocked to hear it on the radio, but also in like the weird stoner guy's car or something too. Like it just like.
Yeah, and I think they were it was that approachability, right? Like they were so easy to sing along to because the lyrics were easy to understand, and the vocal melody was really what kind of drove a lot of their music.
I wonder if that's why they're polarizing. Like I feel like a lot of like even people that like Fat Records punk and that kind of stuff always kind of had like a nose up about Face to Face.
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with their sort of like big success and making it to like a major label after just their second album. And, I think that was in 94, 95. Like it was really kind of, I think they rose up really quickly. Mm-hmm. And, the idea of selling out was so
Oh yeah, like that's a whole
so
thing.
strong about it. Like no one wanted to be a sellout, and you know, hilarious in the world of punk rock. Like it's like they made enough money to like
To eat.
tour in their own van versus sharing it with like 3 other bands.
Looking into it, you'd be like, oh, those guys made it in the punk rock world. And you're like, oh, they got to share a hotel room with each other, just like I do when I go with my friends.
Yeah.
We were like chipping in money to stay somewhere, like a Holiday Inn, just making it in the punk rock world.
Yeah, the idea of selling out and what it means to be on a major label, I don't think has the same, looking back now, like the same.
We thought Face to Face was
importance
rolling
that
around
we
like
thought it
Cisco, but they were just one step above any local band touring.
For sure, yeah, they could just, they were able to like rent a bus for a summer to go on tour. So yeah, I think like lots of bands did what Face to Face did, but the reality was they all, I think, wanted to sound like Face to Face, which to me makes like that's kind of the definition of like this is a band that made a genre or really kind of made it its own, right? Like every city had, a handful of bands that all wore like baggy shorts and skateboard t-shirts and backwards hats, and they all sang the same way. They just wanted to be Face to Face. Face to Face just did it first and better.
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought about it that way, but those are really good points about that band, and I think I've always kind of had my nose up about them too, and I like them too. I'm wondering if like on putting those lenses on it now, it makes a difference too. And also, not being like 16 and thinking about things like that because you're usually an idiot when you're 16. So
I don't know what really happened to Face. Like they still put out music. They had a few lineup changes, and I think members came and left.
Their last album's really good.
It is
like,
the last couple they put out have been really good. Like again, we talk about like sort of that return to form, and I don't even know if it's really that true. But one thing I would say about that band is they got a whole lot. I guess as you would over time, like just more accomplished as musicians, and they like Scott Shiflett's a fantastic bass player. Like man, that guy can play the bass pretty well. I was going to say slap the bass, but I'm not going to.
Thank you. Thank you for not doing that.
You're welcome.
Bass players are nerds.
The worst, really. I saw Face to Face back in like 2017 or so on one of my coworkers. Again, it was one of those funny things because the guy I went with, I wouldn't have pegged as like a punk rock guy. This was actually one of the things that we sort of like, I don't know how it got mentioned, but it's just like, oh, I like that band. Do you like that band? Like they're playing at Mac Hall. Like we should go. And then we ran into like a couple other people from work there too, who again, like wouldn't still listen to that stuff, but they in the day listened to Face to Face. Never saw any local bands. Never paid attention to the scene, but knew Face to Face. But the thing I loved about the show the most was there were so many like kids there, like children, like mom and dad were bringing their like 6 and 8 year olds to like their first punk rock show, which also meant the show was over by 9:30. Which was incredible. Like, know your audience, so get on that band, on the band for ending a show and starting it on time and all that kind of stuff. So they, obviously know that the people that are listening to them are parents now and are less concerned about getting hammered at a show and more concerned about like, getting their kids home and into bed. So the album, the song I picked off the album Face to Face is Blind, which is just the epitome of Face to Face, just so clean and poppy and, still driving. And, it just makes you want to sort of do anything fast and pick up a skateboard or learn to surf or drive with the windows down and just sort of quintessential SoCal skate punk rock.
I'm not trying to throw a wrench into your research, but is this the album that had the song that they put on the Mortal Kombat soundtrack, but with like a techno version of it? I can't remember.
I think I know what you're talking about. I think that was like an album or two later. What I did find out in my research, which I thought was super interesting, is this album was scheduled to come out the same day or the same maybe a week after Sublime's album.
Oh.
And what happened is in a month prior to that, someone leaked Santeria and Walk the Line. I think it's called Walk the Line. To K-Rock in LA, and both of those songs just took off, and they were getting so much radio play. And the label reps for Sublime said, "We got to push this album out faster. Like this, the single's taken off. Like get the album onto the store shelves." So they actually advanced their release date. And the rep for Face to Face called the radio station, said, like, "You're playing this too soon. Take it off the air." And it killed all the momentum off the release.
Well, solid record.
K-Rock was just like, all right, it's off the air. And they didn't play it again after that until
So you can't really compete if you can't play the guitar like a motherfucking riot.
Well, who can? And they don't have Blue Dog in the band.
That's
They could have been Blink-182. Like they would have been 1 year ahead of.
This is probably controversial. Like, I always thought it is interesting, like a band like Face to Face, in my head, should have been bigger than Blink-182. Musically, that band's more palatable to the average rock listener than Blink-182. But I guess, it's all about timing, too. Yeah, I might give that album another listen. I tapped out right before that album. Just, again, probably just being a snob.
Oh, they should have put Disconnected on it, and then that probably would have.
Greatest punk rock song of all time.
You heard it here first.
That's the story here. So my next pick is a late audible, not because I didn't want to use it, but because, and you and me talked about this a little bit before, Nate has used this band so many times on the podcast, and I was like, well, don't want to use it. But the more and more I thought about it, the more and more I was like, well, this is essentially one of those bands that I listened to still, and so much in that year that I had to put it on. The band is Suicide Machines. The album is Destruction by Definition. It really is one of those albums that, for me, stood the test of time. I don't know how you feel about it, but
I wanted to pick this so bad for the list because I love this album still to this day.
It has that nostalgia appeal for me. As soon as I listen to it, it reminds me of hanging out with friends, especially that summer. I think that was the first time that we had cars and we were driving around, and I just remember it being a soundtrack to that summer kind of thing. I love the energy of the album. Dare I say, is it maybe the best ska-core album since Op Ivy?
I don't think you're wrong about that. It nails the ska-core sound, right? It's sort of horns in just the right places, the mix of the clean-up strokes and the distorted guitars,
the hardcore elements, the punk. It gets punk enough that it didn't feel and I'm not saying this in any derogatory term, but it didn't come off as a cheesy ska, third wave ska album at all. It felt
not at all
gritty punk rock album, even though it was on a major, and even though it was in video games and in skate videos and in maybe even on commercials. I don't know. I mean, it got a lot of hype, that album, outside of punk rock worlds. There's an example. That album doesn't seem palatable to somebody that doesn't like punk rock, but somehow it was.
Yeah, I think that's probably that probably ties into the Tony Hawk factor for sure. Which, by the way, I have the game for when they re-released Tony Hawk 1 and 2 a couple of years ago. That game sucks so much. It is so hard.
It's awesome, man. I love it.
The gameplay is terrible.
Oh, I don't know. I love it. But I'm not a big video game guy, so I'm probably stuck in a Luddite version, being this is great.
Maybe that's the problem, is I'm too much of not a video game guy, because I'm nothing. I'm I can't land a trick to save my life.
That could be it. Maybe so you're just angry at it because you suck.
Yeah, that's right. I suck. That's the big problem. Just like real skateboarding.
Yeah. Oh man, real skateboarding. What a disappointment. I want to be good at skateboarding so bad, and I just suck.
Maybe you need to listen to more Suicide Machines and Face to Face, and
I guess I could dress like them, but I could never. I'm just a poser.
So yeah, I remember seeing the Suicide Machines it must have been in '96, because this album had that was the only thing they had out, was really this album, and they had opened for Guttermouth at the Republic, and it was on Father's Day.
Oh yes.
And I went by myself.
I didn't go to it, but I know, because I think it was actually my birthday too.
Yeah, it would have been right around. Yeah, that would have made sense.
Yeah, so you were just a bad friend, is what I'm hearing.
Well, you didn't come to the show.
It's true.
But yeah, I remember like I didn't know the band. I was shockingly there to see Guttermouth because of that stupid Kiss song. I shouldn't say it's a great song by a stupid band.
Is it a great song, or is it just so funny that you're like,
Okay,
it's just
not a great song. It's a song that is funny, and of course reminds me of you, like anything Kiss related. But yeah, like I went to see Guttermouth. I hadn't heard of the Suicide Machines, and then I remember seeing them, and I'm like, holy shit, this band is like everything that is amazing about like ska and punk and just like huge high energy band. And they sang about vans too, which I loved.
Yes. I've always wondered about that song. Was it like did they get like paid to write that song? It's like a very big advertisement.
No, I think they just genuinely liked the shoes.
Vans. Yeah. That's fair. Up until last year I was a religious Vans wearer, so
I'm literally wearing them right now.
The gout got me and I couldn't put on Vans anymore, and I moved to comfier shoes, and then I was like, holy crap, these sneakers with cushions are much better.
Like some of the new Vans have like full cushions, like they're like,
I was a slip-on Vans guy for a very long time, basically since 94. So I don't think there's a song on here that I don't get excited to hear, which is also rare, especially for like an album from 96. Like if I threw that album on like tonight before bed, I'd be so stoked, like every single song.
For sure. Yeah, it's such a great album.
Even the cover's really good. Like the It's Minor Threat, right? Yeah, you gotta want to hear it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't.
That's a great cover. I mean, I know Nate's talked about this before, but you guys played with them. It wouldn't have been on this tour. It must have been on their second album tour then, hey?
It was off their second, or maybe I guess their second. Because I think we played with them in 1998.
They were super nice
because it was a bar show. And
yeah, because you guys weren't 18,
and I wasn't old enough to play it.
Yeah,
I think Nate and Devin were.
I was old enough.
Yeah.
I got drunk with the guys from Bucko 9, which is
were they
a very 90s thing.
Yeah.
Which is such a 90s thing to say. I got drunk with the guys from Bucko 9. Anyway, they were super nice. I thought that was really cool because they were a fairly large band by that point, and they were like, they treated everyone with like respect, and for like a no-name local band, they were really nice to everyone. Really good live too. I think I've seen them like at least 3 times now.
Yeah, I think I've seen them quite a few times now.
Always good.
I don't know who's drumming for them on their last album was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I like the last album a lot.
Original drummer went to
Alkaline, right?
Trio. Yeah,
and he's not in Alkaline anymore though. Not on this album.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he's not on
the dude from Against Me. Is the drummer now. Anyway, that's a whole tangent we don't need to go on. Justin, why don't you tell us your song?
My song is Blind off the album Face to Face by the band Face to Face.
Suicide Machines with The Real You off Destruction by Definition.
What if I'm right and you wrong? What if you knew it all along? What if I figured out that I did not belong? What if it always bothered me? What if I never did believe? Would it be wrong if I decided I should leave? If I pretended I was fine, struck it from my mind, would it still be there? What if I do anything to make it seem alright? It's alright. the fence won't break or devastate. It's really hard for me to tell you everything that I want to tell to you. Some say such a number to the rim, I'm sure that I never knew. Don't real you. What's the real you? Oh, what is the real you? What's the real you? Oh, what is the real you? What's the real you? Oh, what is the real you? Conflicting fears of interest pose a threat to who we are. Then when I wanna be, we just can't see. So we throw the walls up around ourselves. And if it's just dull and doubtful, you know it's our couple standards. Gotta wrap some tight inside ourselves and never let us out. What's the real you? What is the real you? What's the real you? What is the real you? What's the real you? What is the real you? Motherfucker! Fucking bitch! Hypocrite! The real you! What's the real you? What is the real you? What's the real you? What is the real you? What's the real you? What is the real you? What's the real you?
So we've made it to the episode, which is kind of nice, but I guess we're at the thank you part now. Nate used to point at me and say, do the thank yous. And then I'd be like, it's really the thank you time? We'd have a little banter and then he'd edit it out. So with no one pointing at me to do the thank yous, here's the thank yous. I just want to thank everyone for sticking around and being patient while we try to figure out things here. I'm hoping the quality doesn't suffer because as much as I like to mock Nate, he did a lot of the heavy lifting when it came to putting this whole show together. Secondly, thank you to Justin for filling in and joining me. Thanks, Juice. Really appreciate it. It's been fun talking with you tonight. I hope you want to continue and keep talking music with me while we do this thing. Thanks to the WhatsApp group. Anybody who's checked us out online or wrote us a message or sent us a song to check out or sent a list in. You can check us out on Instagram. Please, if you like the episode or our show, go back and listen to some other episodes. Tell a friend. Rate us on Apple Music or Spotify. And stick around for more episodes. Thanks again. Justin, do you have anything you want to say? You want to say thank you to anybody?
I do not. I'm just really happy to be here. I think it's been a lot of fun, and I look forward to doing more of these with you.
You don't want to say thanks to Nate for stepping aside so you can steal his spot?
I'm just keeping a seat warm for him.
Stealing a spot. You basically killed him. Well, why don't you just tell us what your last pick is so we can get out of this awkwardness?
We did it, Mike. We made it all the way to number 5. This was like a crystal clear pick. As soon as we decided the year, I'm like, well, there's no way this album is not going to make it.
Sublime.
This, featuring not Bradley, because he died. This is without a doubt one of my top albums of all time. So here we go again with the grandiose sweeping statements. But I think this one is pretty easy to back up. One of my favorite albums of all time. I can honestly say I know the entire thing front to back. Every drum line, every guitar riff, every lyric. And as a non-dramatic statement, this album, hands down, changed my life. It changed the way I listened to music and I thought about music. It changed the way I thought about what a band could do and say and stand for. I read all of the liner notes that came along with it. I researched what they were talking about in the lyrics, so I knew more about where they were coming from. And, you know, the CD itself, when I think about it, it made it really crystal clear about who they were and what they stood for. Right clear as day on the silver CD in white lettering was pro-feminist, gay positive, animal friendly, anti-fascist. I wanted to be a part of all of that. The band, of course, is Propaganda. The album is Less Talk, More Rock. And this album, like I said, changed my life. I think.
Sorry. I don't think there's a band that's probably influenced our thought as like a group of friends more than Propaganda. Like, right or wrong, they opened our eyes to so much stuff that we never would have thought about, especially at such a young age. Again, circling back, we're singing songs like "I Want to Hump You," but then we're also listening to Propaganda and learning about all these important things at the same time. It's such a relevant and important album, I think, in shaping who we were. And sorry, go on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a transformative album, and I think coming back to the local scene and how many this was sort of really at a point in time when we were going out and seeing bands, and when this album came out, I feel like a lot of local bands changed, and they felt like they needed to have a message, and there were whether it was tables or leaflets or handouts or whatever from anti-racist action or PETA or Food Not Bombs or Amnesty International or whatever the cause was. I feel like this album just created such a shift in really bringing the political part of punk rock, which is really where punk started from, like all the way back to its very roots. It was about standing for something and not being afraid to be adversarial and counterculture and thought provoking. And I think this album in particular really helped get that sort of movement back connected to the music. From an album standpoint, I think every song on this album is perfect. The album art is from the Calgary Stampede, which is maybe not the brightest mark for Calgary and a bit more of a black eye in the context that it's shown. The band I thought they were always from Winnipeg, but they're from Port Tyler's La Prairie, which is outside of Winnipeg. It's John K. Sampson's last album with the band. He only did the two before he went on to the Weaker Thans. And when you hear Today's Empires and Tomorrow's Ashes, you can really see where the departure came between that and the Weaker Thans. You could play those two albums to someone that didn't know either band, and in no world would they think that they used to be in a band together. I was reading a few things, and this album, like the band wanted to make it so crystal clear to their audience that they're not a skate punk band. They are not, the Good Riddance or the, certainly not the Face to Face, where if you weren't there to listen to the message that they had, then they're probably not the band for you. And they were okay with that. And they were okay with being confrontational and adversarial and really challenging sort of the status quo, or even really pushing their sort of thoughts and opinions, sort of in a take it or leave it kind of way.
One thing, there's a lot of shitty things about living in Calgary, especially in that time. One thing we were lucky is that we were so close to Winnipeg that we were so influenced and like connected because of that's the touring cycle. I was like, bands from out there could come here and we could go there easy. So we got a lot of that there. Like, I think we got a lot more propaganda than a lot of people did. And like the G7 stuff, like we got a lot of it. So I think we were pretty lucky in that way, and how much it influenced our local scene. Like you nailed it there. Like, I don't know if bands necessarily were trying to be propaganda, but they were emulating their political stance and whatnot. And it was a good thing to grow up in as a teenager, I thought.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it really helped form some pretty, it was very influential and helped form some pretty like strong opinions. And I was gonna say like it builds character, but I'm really hitting my dad ears with that saying.
I feel like the key was that, okay, for someone like me I wouldn't have known about a lot of that stuff. It at least opened my eyes and made me want to explore it and then form my own opinions about it and whatnot. And then like, at times, like when I was 16 or 17, I thought propaganda was too in your face about it. But at the same time, it's like probably the reason I looked up something and was like, oh, well, I should learn a little bit more about that, or before I comment or anything about or saying anything, I should really learn. And I think that's what propaganda was really good at doing, just forcing you to think. I don't know if it necessarily hit home with a chunk of their audience because of the Fat Record thing, which I think it's something they're still fighting against. I mean, when I saw them live, I couldn't even handle being there because I'm like, man, do these people not even listen to the lyrics? Which I'm guessing they don't or don't understand them. But I think there's that other 50% really bought into what they were saying and tried to learn from them, or at least explore ideas that were outside of their normal bubble. And
yeah, for sure. And I think they would, sort of have their, if it was 10 messages or causes or beliefs that they, carried and didn't shy away from, maybe not all 10 of them hit with every member of the audience, but, if you can get each person to take away one or two or three, I think they're doing their job in terms of moving the needle and aligning with their audience.
For sure.
So this album was the second released by Propagandhi, the first one also on Fat Records. And I think I read somewhere that they signed on to do the second album while they were still recording the first one, because Fat Mike really liked the sound and sort of believed in where they were headed with their music. And I don't think I knew this at the time, but this was produced by Ryan Green, but before he had Motor Studios. And I think as we go through the next handful of episodes and go through the next few years, we'll see Ryan Green's name pop up a whole bunch. I think he was so instrumental in the sort of mid to late 90s, punk rock scene and sound, and virtually everything that came out of Fat Records, I think had Ryan's stamp on it. And he's got a very signature production and engineering sound to him. I was also really surprised that it was released in April of 96, but they didn't record it until January, which seems like a really crazy turnaround time.
That's a really quick turnaround.
Yeah, like to flip full length might be a bit of a stretch. I think the whole album's like 36 minutes, if that.
When did How to Clean Everything come out? Do you know?
I think it was in 93.
Okay, absolutely. I'm like, their sound got progressively better for less talk. Like, it's really a lot fuller than How to Clean Everything. So I was like, if that came out in like 95 and this came out in 96, that's an even more insane. But
yeah, that would also be a pretty big change in sound. I remember seeing a video, and I'm sure it's on the whatever Bing's equivalent of YouTube is.
BingTube.
On the BingTube. There's upwards of 6 videos on the BingTube. This might be one of them.
All adult.
Is there another type of video on the internet? I haven't yet to see it. There's a video of them playing, and we thought nation states were a good idea. But it's Propaganda playing it in like 1989 or 1990, like well before even How to Clean Everything came out.
Oh, crazy.
Which is also nuts. That song is that old. And that song is as great as it is, maybe like one of those really sort of quintessential songs from that era, and one that sort of helped push Propaganda to more and more circles. But I was surprised to hear that song was actually substantially older than this album is. Not the song that I chose for the list. I chose I Was a Preteen McCarthyist off the album. I could have picked any song off this album. They all sort of carry the same way with me, but I just love the way that the song paints a really interesting picture of growing up in a very sort of typical household, like very kind of pedestrian, and just taking everything at face value. But then if you don't sort of take that opportunity to challenge the status quo or the messages you're being fed, you're not really you're not really developing any independent thoughts. And I think the song really sort of has a couple of messages. One is like, you need to find ways to think for yourself and not just, do everything because your dad or your family did it.
Are you calling people sheep? I heard that's a big popular thing to call people these days.
The sheeple. And then the other message is when you do that, you're running the risk of going out alone. But sometimes it's better to be sort of right and by yourself than to just sort of follow the masses blindly. So the song delivers a great message with a nice balance of pop hooks and harmonies, but also in typical Propaganda fashion, there's a pretty hard-hitting, fist-pumping, driving pace to the whole track.
If you don't like that album, I don't know if you should be listening to this podcast. That's a pretty bold statement.
That's a fair statement.
So I can't believe I'm going to do this with you on the first episode. Here we are, another topic, another opportunity to talk about Suburban Teenage Wasteland Blues. Justin, for the record, which is better, Suburban or Twisted Mind?
Suburban is without a doubt a top 5 strung out album.
That's not an answer. We need a definitive choice here.
Twisted by Design is a better album.
All right. I like it. I agree with you. I don't have a spreadsheet to prove otherwise, but that's an inside joke for the WhatsApp chat group.
Should we rank Rancid albums too?
We'll get there. Don't worry. But yeah, I just felt weird not putting this on here because I 100% listened to this album probably more than most albums in 96 and probably for the rest of that decade. We've talked about it a lot on the podcast, so I don't even know what there is more I could say about Strung Out or Suburban Teenage Wasteland Blues. It's still up there for one of those albums that ticks off both nostalgia and longevity. It's never going to be a Critics' Choice album, but it's one of those albums that means a lot to me. At the time, I loved Strung Out so much because they were the perfect bridge from my metal days to punk rock days. Like, they kind of kept a foot in both worlds, which was me at that time. And yeah, I was lucky enough to see them on this tour at the Republic with 10 Foot Pole and Straight Faced. And we saw, I think Jim was still in the band at this time too, which is kind of cool. I mean, I don't know if it was because I was 15 or 16, but I think that's the best I saw them live ever. I don't know. Were you at the show?
Yeah, I was at the show. There was definitely some standout movements, having them play, like hear them play Gearbox live at probably like almost twice the album speed, which is already insanely fast. But yeah, like it was a phenomenal show.
Yeah, like I don't know if it was nostalgia, but whatever. That show was awesome. I think either Jim or the singer almost got in a fight with somebody too, which is interesting. It was like a Sunday night or something. Maybe even a Sunday afternoon. I'm not sure if we've ever discussed this on air, but what are your thoughts on this versus on the original mix and the remastered mix? You're like more of a mix guy. So do you like the new version or the old version?
I actually think I prefer the old version, which I usually don't. Like, I can usually like appreciate a good remaster. I think the remaster has just, this is actually shocking that I'm going to say this, it is way too much kick drum in the mix.
Oh.
And it is overpowering to the entire thing. And I feel
agree
like
with
the
you.
original just has a little bit more, I think the lack of refinement to it has just a little bit better balance.
Yeah, I feel like they cleaned it up too much, which is kind of a weird thing to say. But they cleaned it up too much and it lost any edge it had. Like, then it sounded like they were trying to make it more of a metal album, or I don't know what's the difference. But like the compression on the original mix is somehow better. And usually compression doesn't do that.
Yeah, it really should.
Especially like a techie kind of band like Strung Out.
Yeah. Yeah, like when I listened to the remaster, I'm like, this is, and actually like one of the things, like I'm a sucker for a good kick drum, and I'm just like, this is all it is. Like, it's just way too much bass drum.
Maybe the drummer mixed it.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe that's why he's gone.
That's what he did with all the money he stole from the band.
Wow. Controversy. Is that real?
Yeah, I think that was the whole story.
I don't actually
my
even
personal belief is not so I don't get slapped with a libel suit here.
I don't think we're big enough to.
One of the two. I'll have to bing that later. Yeah, I think he was like sort of skimming off the top, and I think he justified it as like a management fee because he was handling like so much of the business side of the band, but not telling them that he was doing all of that and using it to fund his motocross label.
Motocross killed so many things, like being cool. The song I picked was Solitaire. It's just I could pick almost any song off this album as well. For some reason, Solitaire was sticking out when I was making this list, and that's the one I went with. Although I am tempted to change it to Gearbox after you brought that up, but I think I'll stick with Solitaire.
There's so many good songs on their second best album.
Well played. Well played. I appreciate that commentary. I don't know if we're going to disagree. Do we agree too much in this podcast? This is not very Nate and Mike-ish.
Well, we disagreed on Sammy Hagar. And you were quite taken by my face-to-face comment on the greatest punk rock song of all time. So
okay.
I'm sure we'll find some points of abrasion as we carry on.
Sounds good. If you want to let us know what your song was, and then we can say goodbye.
I do, Mike. Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward, like I said, to doing more of this. Closing out with, it was a preteen McCarthyist off the album Less Talk, More Rock by none other than Propagandy.
And Strung Out, Solitaire off Suburban Teenage Wasteland Blues. Thanks for listening. Stay cool. Be excellent to each other.
I spent spring break on the flight line of the base of the Carolina. nose of a USA 10 separated flesh from bone and honed its skills on lesser humans and thus confirmed the suspicions earned in the 7 years proceeding about the lies I was told and truth be known. I'm probably better off believing. Instead I'm better off believing. Instead I'm better off believing. But how could they do this to me? Born at first, brought up ankle deep. Maybe you're a lot like me, identified. 14 years without a choice, terrified. The morning you woke up to realize when you jump ship, you can either swim for shore or drown. Don't let the fuckers drag you down.